Hello everyone. This is the 25th part of the story, Blade God of Blood. Chapter 49, Malik's Invitation. Bruce! Betty pulled Banner, and Banner came to his senses and said embarrassedly, I'm sorry. It's okay, Dr. Banner, I have to see the senator in a while, so I'll just cut to the chase. Bert said, If you are willing to stay in the Oscorp, I can protect you. If you are not willing, I will not force you. You can leave at any time, but what will happen after you leave? I believe you know it yourself. Besides being chased, what else could it be? Banner smiled bitterly, and he asked hesitantly, What do I need to do to join your Oscorp? Bert said solemnly, You need to be studied. What? Banner was stunned, and Bert smiled. Just kidding, Dr. Banner, you have 7 doctoral degrees, are you afraid you can't find anything to do? Of course, it's not wrong to say that you are researched, but you are the one who researches you. You can use the resources of the Oscorp to research the Hulk. Mr. Green, I can study with you. Dr. Stern said, I have promised Mr. Wang to join the Oscorp, and he will fully support my research on artificial blood and vampire genes. Banner was a little moved, and he said, I'll think about it. Think slowly, don't worry. Here, I can protect your safety. Bert smiled and said, In addition, I will not restrict your use of mobile phones and computers. You can do whatever you want. If you want to see someone, you can also invite them here. Banner said gratefully, Thank you. You are welcome. Bert waved his hand, he thought of something, and said with a smile, Speaking of which, Dr. Banner, you are a celebrity now, and many lawyers have expressed that they want to help you sue the military for compensation. What? Banner was stunned. Betty thought of something and asked, Mr. Wang, did you publicize his story? Yes, but I didn't reveal your name and appearance, Dr. Banner. All news is codenamed by Mr. Green and Hulk. Bert said, Dr. Banner, this is good for your current situation. At least the military does not dare to arrest you arbitrarily. As for whether to stand up or not, it is up to you. No, I have to stay away from the crowd as much as possible, otherwise there will be a disaster at any time. Banner shook his head with a wry smile and said, I won't appear in public until the Hulk is eliminated. Bert said, Dr. Banner, you don't need to eliminate the Hulk. The Hulk is yourself. He shares the emotional area with you, otherwise he will not try his best to protect Betty. Banner frowned. But he is uncontrollable. You also saw his destructive power. That's just because you didn't control him. Bert said to Banner. He is like a newborn child. You keep him locked up, and he will naturally be angry when he comes out. If you let him out every once in a while, let Betty teach him by the side. This won't work, this will not work, Hulk will hurt Betty. Before Bert finished speaking, Banner interrupted him, he said loudly. Hulk must be eliminated, he should not be born. If he is not born, you will die. I'd rather die. Banner roared, his eyes turned a little green, Betty's complexion changed, and she hurriedly comforted Banner. Bruce, breathe. Banner also reacted incorrectly and hurriedly used the breathing method he had learned to lower his heartbeat. After a while, he let out a breath and said apologetically to Bert, Mr. Wang, I'm sorry. But the Hulk shouldn't exist. If you are like this, Hulk will be even angrier, and sooner or later, he will replace you. Bert sighed and said, You have a good rest, Dr. Stern. Talk to Dr. Banner more, and see if there is anything you can do to help him. Stern said, Okay, I was just about to chat more with Mr. Green. If you need anything, open the list and give it to the staff. Bert nodded to Betty and turned to leave. Banner's attitude is a bit troublesome. After walking out of the room, Bert frowned slightly. At this moment, Lilith called and Senator Stern was here. In the Oscorp office, Bert and Senator Stern shook hands and said with a smile, Senator, we meet again. No way, the military and council are in a hurry. Senator Stern laughed. The military has tentatively agreed to buy War Abomination, but they're asking for a few aides to join your team. Bert said, This is no problem, but the core secrets of war abomination will not be open to them. It's natural. Senator Stern nodded in satisfaction. He said, Bert, General Ross has been dismissed and handed over to a military court. Bert knew that this was the military's sincerity, and he smiled. Deserved it. Of course, sincerity belongs to sincerity. Bert would not be so stupid to think that the military just let go of its vigilance against the vampire clan. But this is not a big problem, because, in a few months, the aliens will come. He deserves it. People are protesting against him everywhere outside the White House. Senator Stern said with a smile. Bert, the military asked me to ask you, what do you need to pay to get Dr. Banner? His blood is very important. Dr. Banner is not a trade item. If the military wants it, it can send someone to persuade him. If he wants, he can leave at any time. Bert said. However, he has a bad temper. Don't provoke him. I don't want to rebuild the Oscorp building. Rest assured, we know how terrifying he is. Senator Stern laughed. By the way, Bert, Councilman Malik has a banquet this weekend. Are you interested in attending? Malik of the World Security Council? I'll be there on time. Bert was a little surprised. If he remembered correctly, this Gideon Malik was a giant of Hydra, that is to say, Hydra wanted to win him over. See you then. Senator Stern shook hands with Bert and turned to leave. He was going to try a new car, a very low-key antique car. Hydra? Bert stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, his eyes narrowed. There are many factions of Hydra, and the one from S.H.I.E.L.D. must not be touched, but Gideon Malik's faction is different. I may be able to take advantage of this. After all, they suffered very late. Moreover, the god they believe in is a bit interesting. The Malik family is a very large political family in the United States. They have existed since the founding of the United States and have a pivotal power in the country. Therefore, the banquet of the Malik family has always been a place where the upper class flocks and everyone is honored to receive an invitation except Bert. It's so boring, I shouldn't have come. Bert stood in the corner, thinking unhappily, he is too young, and he has not disclosed his identity, so no one will come to him. There are a few noble ladies who are interested in Bert's wicked temperament. The problem is that Bert is not interested in them. Hello, Mr. Wong, I'm Stephanie Malik. At this time, a beautiful woman in white came over and stretched out her hand to Bert. The people next to her were very surprised when they saw this. Gideon Malik's daughter took the initiative to talk to that young man. People with less than a certain identity are not qualified to know who Bert is. Bert and Stephanie shook hands and said with a smile, Miss Malik, hello? Stephanie smiled and said, Mr. Wong, are you satisfied with the banquet? I wasn't satisfied at first, but when you came, I was satisfied. Bert laughed, and Stephanie covered her mouth and chuckled. She chatted with Bert for a while, and suddenly asked, Mr. Wong, what do you think of God? God? Bert glanced at Stephanie and said, The reason why people worship God is because of what they want. From this aspect, I am also a god. Stephanie was surprised. She asked, How? Bert said proudly, I can give power, money, immortality, and even superpowers to others. Tell me, am I a god? It seems to be true. No wonder you are called the Blood God. Stephanie was amazed, and she asked again, Then do you believe that there is a real God in this world? Bert shook his head. God is just a stronger person. If I go back to ancient times, I will become the God that countless people worship. Stephanie frowned, not because Bert was too arrogant, but because what he said made sense. Of course, this was not enough to shake Stephanie's faith. She said, Mr. Wang, you are so confident. My father wants to see you. I wonder if you are free? Bert smiled and said, Mr. Malik wants to see me, and he has to be free, just like Miss Stephanie. You want to ask me out. Mr. Wang is joking, but if you have time, we can go out together. Stephanie smiled and led Bert to the study, where Gideon Malik with white hair was waiting for him. After a brief chat, Councilman Malik spoke to the topic. Mr. Wang, does Oscorp plan to develop aerospace technology? Bert said with certainty. Yes, the Oscorp intends to complete the first spacecraft within 20 years. Councilman Malik did not expect that Bert had a plan in this regard. He asked in surprise, Can it be completed within 20 years? Yes, Mr. Vanko of the Oscorp is a real genius. In 20 years, he will be able to create a spaceship. Bert said, Humans should not only focus on the Earth. The universe is very big. The stars and the beyond are always waiting for us to conquer. I agree. Councilman Malik nodded and he said, Mr. Wang, the Malik family is looking forward to the spaceship of the Oscorp. If you don't see a spaceship in 20 years, I will give you the Oscorp. Bert laughed, and Councilman Malik laughed too. His meaning was very clear. As long as the Oscorp made every effort to develop space technology, the Malik family would speak for the Oscorp and even provide some help. With the status of the Malik family, this commitment is quite heavy. And the reason why he made such a promise was not that he wanted to recruit Bert as his son-in-law, but because the God hive they believed in was on another planet, and they needed a spaceship to bring the God back. Gideon Malik's Hydra, the biggest dream is to welcome back their God. Bert shook hands with Councilman Malik, but he sneered inwardly. God? When I crush your God in front of your face, you will know that God is nothing. In a blink of an eye, several days passed. Although General Ross was sent to the military court, the protests continued, because everyone wanted the military to promise not to do this kind of thing in the future, and the military had not promised to compensate for that street loss. The military didn't want compensation at all, had been wrangling with the merchants, and wanted to pull the watchman company and the city government into the water, but Bert and the city government had no interest in paying attention to them. Bert is rich, but that doesn't mean he will waste money. As for the city government, they are raising $500 million, and they are not interested in helping the military fill the hole. Mr. Wang is amazing. He has brought the Oscorp back to life in just a few months. If Mr. Osborne is alive, he will be very pleased. At night, Spider-Man hung upside down under the sign reading the newspaper. At this time, he turned to the Daily Bugle, and there was no accident, and they still scolded him. Spider-Man turned to the next paper in dismay, and it was Electro and the others. The Daily Bugle did not dare to scold them at will, because that would make them receive a warning letter from the Watchman Company. Why don't I join the Watchman Company too? Mr. Wang is a very nice person. He not only invited me to be a sparring coach, but also invited me to join the Oscorp. It is because of this job that I can afford the tuition fee, and I also met cute Miss Gwen and the charming Miss Hardy. Oh, they're all good. Just when the scumbag Spider-Man was hesitating whether to choose Gwen or Felicia, wretched laughter suddenly came from a distance. Little girl, do you want Uncle to play with you? There is a situation. Spider-Man immediately glued the newspaper to the sign, and then quickly swung toward the place where the sound came from. After a while, he saw a little girl in purple clothes being led into an alley by a few gangsters. Spider-Man immediately swung over to save people, but to his surprise, the screams of men came out one after another in the alley. When he arrived at the alley, he found that all the gangsters fell to the ground. The little girl was rummaging through them with a short stick to pick up a purse. What's the situation? Spider-Man said that he had been a hero for so long, and he had never seen such a situation. Such a beautiful little girl solved all the gangsters? The little girl in purple was startled when she heard the movement. Seeing it was Spider-Man, she breathed a sigh of relief and shouted, Spider-Man, this is my spoils, you can't rob it! Spider-Man asked in amazement. The spoils? Spider-Man doesn't take spoils from children. You fought all these people? Of course, they are so weak that they can be bullied by a child. The little girl in purple said as a matter of course. Also, they are so poor, they have no money on them, and even their watches are fakes. As expected, it would be better to rob those gangs. Chapter 50 Trap. In other words, you deliberately lead them into the alley to loot? Spider-Man feels a little dizzy. Isn't it a little too amazing for children these days? The little girl nodded without hesitation. Yes, I am showing mercy. These scumbags should have been killed directly. Spider-Man shouted. This is not right. It is not right to lure others to commit crimes, and even more wrong to conduct robbery. The little girl said with a look of disgust. It's pedantic. No wonder you are not as popular as the Electro. The children like the Electro, but not you. Really? Do the kids not like me? Spider-Man felt battered. He thought of something and shouted. Wait, that's because Electro was on a kids' show. That's not the point. The point is, you can't do that. You're going to give them back. No. The little girl was very disdainful. She put her wallet and short stick in the bag, turned around, and ran away. Spider-Man was about to chase, and the little girl shouted, Help! Spider-Man is bullying a child. Spider-Man almost fell. This little girl is really difficult to deal with. He was about to chase her out. Suddenly a woman's voice called for help in the distance. Help! Who will help me? Spider-Man hesitated and decided to save people first. Seeing that Spider-Man was no longer chasing, the little girl snorted and took out the wallet she just grabbed from her backpack and started counting the money. After counting, the little girl sighed. It's so little. When will I be able to collect enough money to find my father? Why don't I rob the rich? The Oscorp seems to be very popular recently. Leaving aside the little girl's thoughts for a while, Spider-Man followed the sound and rushed to the door of an abandoned warehouse, and saw two tattooed strong men who were intending to cheat on a woman. Nothing to say, Spider-Man went up and easily knocked the two men to the ground, and then he reached out to the woman who fell to the ground. Ma'am, the night in Hell's Kitchen is very dangerous. You shouldn't go out alone. Thank you, Spider-Man, the woman said gratefully, and at the same time raised her hand to hold Spider-Man's hand. Huh! Spider-Man sensed danger and immediately pulled back. Seeing that Spider-Man was about to flee, the woman immediately clenched her fists, and the jewels on the ring shot out, hitting Spider-Man's chest. Immediately afterward, the dazzling electric light lit up, and Spider-Man screamed and fell to the ground with a piece of clothes on his chest charred. Spider-Man is nothing more than that. The woman sneered disdainfully, got up, and walked over to knock Spider-Man unconscious, but Spider-Man suddenly swept her to the ground with a kick, and then kicked her far away. Then, Spider-Man got up like nothing. He looked at the charred clothes and sighed. Another one is ruined. It's so troublesome to make clothes. Why don't I go to the store to buy Spider-Man merchandise? It's a bit expensive, and they don't give me a share. At this moment, a group of guys in black t-shirts rushed in at the door of the warehouse, blocking the door tightly. Spider-Man understood that this was a trap for him. He looked around and found that the warehouse was not large, the ceiling was not high, and there was only one small window, so he couldn't escape at all. Spider-Man said, You chose a good place. A tall and burly guy with a bullseye mask walked in and said with a grin, Of course, it's a good place. I even sent someone to reinforce the walls. Spider-Man, you can't escape today even with your wings attached. I don't have wings. Spider-Man asked curiously. Hey man, can you see when you dress like this? You'll know, come on, the doctor said, take him alive. The tall figure, that is, the first general under Kingpin, Bullseye, waved and shouted, and the group of men in black immediately began to tear their clothes, covered in muscles. Spider-Man complained, I said it all, you enhanced people don't need to tear your clothes, and you won't transform? The strengthened people were furious when they heard the words, threw away their clothes, and rushed up with various weapons. The woman before also got up from the ground and joined the siege. This year, enhanced people are becoming more and more worthless. Spider-Man raised his hand to shoot the web, but found a problem with the launcher, and tried several times to no avail. It's the current just now, damn it, I wouldn't have bought cheap parts. Spider-Man scolded and scuffled with the enhanced man who rushed up. Spider-Man always feels like an agile hero, but in fact, he is an all-rounder, and his strength can even easily catch the fist of the Winter Soldier. So even if he is besieged by such a strong person, he is still not at a disadvantage, and they have come and gone. Thank you, good-tempered big sister. Thank you, bad-tempered little sister. Thank you for beating me every day. Spider-Man kicked an enhanced man with a kick of his back while talking, while Bullseye was holding a handful of playing cards, watching all this with a cold eye. After a while, Spider-Man jumped up from the ground because he avoided the attack. Bullseye flicked his wrist, and 5 playing cards shot at Spider-Man like sharp blades. Spider-Man was startled and tried his best to dodge, but he was still cut through his arms and legs by 3 specially made playing cards. Spider-Man landed and shouted, "Despicable! Thank you for the compliment!" Bullseye laughed and threw cards, and the other enhancers stepped up their siege, and Spider-Man's situation suddenly became precarious. At this moment, a few smoke bombs were suddenly dropped from the position of the small window, and a lot of smoke came out of it. Seeing someone disrupting the game, Bullseye was furious, and with a flick of his hand, the playing cards spun at high speed and shot toward the small window. Bullseye used his skill on the poker cards. It just flew out of the window, and immediately drew an arc and shot downwards. What? There was a crisp scream outside, and the voice seemed to be a little girl. Spider-Man's complexion changed greatly, and he rushed out along the memory in the smoke. Those enhanced people couldn't be stopped in time because their sight was blocked. Bullseye sensed the movement, and the playing cards in his hand shot at Spider-Man one after another. Spider-Man grabbed an enhanced man next to him, used him as a shield to block the playing cards, and then pushed him hard toward Bullseye. Bullseye felt something hit him, and he kicked it regardless, and the enhanced man flew directly in response. At this moment, Spider-Man rushed over, knocked the Bullseye on the shoulder, and then quickly rushed out of the door and ran to the side. At the corner of the outer wall, Spider-Man saw a little girl in purple fall to the ground in pain. It was the little girl who robbed those thugs before. She was shot in the abdomen by a playing card and was bleeding non-stop. With such an injury, other girls must have been crying a lot, but the little girl with purple hair didn't cry. She covered her wound, wrinkled her face, gritted her teeth, and was patient. I overestimated myself. The little girl was full of regrets. If she knew it earlier, she would not help Spider-Man. She didn't want to die, she still had to find her father. At the same time, in a desert in Texas, a melancholy middle-aged man wearing a leather jacket and riding a Harley suddenly looked up and looked in the direction of New York. He felt that his daughter was hurt. "No one can hurt my daughter!" The melancholy man was furious, turned the bike around, and drove towards New York at a high speed. On the way, his anger could not be suppressed, and his whole body burned with a raging fire, and even Harley's motorcycle was transformed into a flaming chariot. What's even more amazing is that the whole body of the man was burned to the ground, leaving only the bones, which looked like a flaming death god that came out of hell. Outside the warehouse, seeing the little girl like this, Spider-Man felt a lot of heartache and self-blame. If it wasn't for helping him, the little girl wouldn't have been shot seriously. That damn guy is not human. I'll take you to the hospital right away. Spider-Man rushed to pick up the little girl and rushed to the nearby hospital. At this time, Bullseye and the others chased after him. Seeing that Spider-Man was about to escape, Bullseye immediately smashed the things around him as hidden weapons and smashed at Spider-Man one after another. Spider-Man has spider sense and can avoid Bullseye's attack without turning his head, but his movements are too large. The little girl's wound is pulled, and she can't help but groan. This won't work! Spider-Man was furious. At this time, he thought of a place and was overjoyed. He quickly changed direction and fled there. Bullseye and the others naturally chased after him. People on the street exclaimed when they saw Spider-Man being chased. Many people hurriedly called the police station. Bullseye became more and more anxious when he saw it. Unfortunately, it was just a short distance away, and he couldn't catch up no matter how much he chased him. At this moment, Spider-Man suddenly stopped at the door of a tea house that had not closed, and shouted, "Madame Gao, help me!" Spider-Man didn't rush in because he knew how scary this tea house was. Madame Gao, who was meditating in the backyard, heard the sound, opened her eyes abruptly, and rushed to the lobby at a speed that was completely unsuitable for her age. When she saw Spider-Man, she motioned the waiter to open the door, and then said, "Come in and talk." "Thank you, Madame Gao." Spider-Man quickly carried the little girl in, and Madame Gao asked him to put the little girl on the table to check her injuries. "It's not a big problem, she won't die." Madame Gao tapped twice on the left and right sides of the little girl's wound, and the little girl immediately felt a lot less pain and looked at Madame Gao gratefully. "With such a serious injury you didn't cry, you are a strong girl." Madame Gao smiled kindly, pressed her hand lightly, and forced the poker card out with her breath. The little girl groaned and held back her cry. Madame Gao admired her more and more and used her chi to help the little girl seal the wound so that it would not continue to bleed. The little girl looked at Madame Gao in surprise. What kind of ability is this? So amazing, and so comfortable. At this time, Bullseye and the others chased outside. Bullseye was about to rush in. Madame Gao shouted, "It's easy to get in, but it's hard to get out. You scaring me?" Bullseye was about to sneer, but suddenly he saw Madame Gao's face clearly, and he broke out in a cold sweat, turned around, and fled without saying a word. As a general under Kingpin, Bullseye has seen Madame Gao. He knows how terrible this old lady is. Even Kingpin is very respectful to her. Not to mention, the place where the old lady is now is still the domain of vampires. Bullseye just turned around when he saw a large group of people rushing out of the construction site next to them. "Vampires!" Bullseye quickly led people to retreat. This mission was considered a failure, but it was not a complete failure. At the very least, the blood of Spider-Man was obtained. The vampires were about to chase when Madame Gao turned her head and shouted, "Don't bother, let them go." "Yes, Madame Gao." The vampires respectfully agreed, then turned around and returned to the construction site. They were renovating the headquarters of the Blood God Group, and it would not be long before the headquarters of the Blood God Group was officially built. Seeing that Bullseye and the others had all left, Spider-Man breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, he remembered the previous flaw and was shocked Peter knew Madame Gao, but Spider-Man did not. Fortunately, Madame Gao didn't seem to find anything. She stopped the bleeding for the little girl and said, "Take her to the nearest hospital for treatment. By the way, you can treat yourself." "It is okay." Spider-Man nodded first, then thought of something, and said a little embarrassedly, "I have no money, and this kind of injury requires identification." "No money?" Madame Gao snorted and said, "Are you going to let her pay for it herself?" Hearing the words, the little girl immediately said in a weak voice, "I have no money." "You have? You really shouldn't use that money." Spider-Man was so annoyed that he almost scratched his hood. A penny beats a hero. Seeing this, Madame Gao asked, "Why don't you join the Watchman Company? If there is a company to help, there is no need to worry about this kind of thing." Spider-Man said, "I just want to be everyone's good neighbor. I don't want to be a star, and I don't want to make money from this kind of thing. I haven't seen such an innocent child for a long time." Madame Gao sighed secretly, but the little girl scolded. "Idiot, you don't know how to earn money." Madame Gao said, "You can authorize the Watchman Company to make them produce your merchandise, and all the profits will be used to make up for the losses you caused so that it will not violate your principles. Is this still possible? I've seen that some people do that. They don't give me any money, and they sell them at a high price." Spider-Man rejoiced, and the little girl curled her lips and scolded, "Idiot." Madame Gao thought about it and said, "Forget it, leave this girl here. I will treat her, and the medical expenses will be deducted from your future remuneration." "Thank you, Madame Gao. Cough. Thank you, old lady." Spider-Man was overjoyed. Just halfway through, he thought of something and hurriedly changed his mind. Madame Gao gave Spider-Man a speechless look. "Do you think I don't know your identity?" Spider-Man said to the little girl. I'll go first, and I'll bring gifts to see you tomorrow. The little girl shouted from behind Spider-Man. Bring some gold as a present, I don't want the rest. Spider-Man staggered and almost fell. Where would he get the gold? And besides, who would take gold as a gift for visiting patients? After Spider-Man left, Madame Gao asked the little girl, What's your name? Do you need me to inform your family? My name is Mindy McCready. The little girl Mindy said with a bit of frustration. My father went missing. Madame Gao asked. You are a strong girl, Mindy. Have you killed someone? Mindy said proudly. I am also a superhero. My name is Hit Girl. Hit Girl? Good name. Madame Gao smiled, and then said to Mindy, Your martial arts qualifications are quite good, but there is a problem with your training method. I didn't lie to you. Do you want to take me as a teacher? I can teach you real kung fu. Madame Gao said with a kind face, her greatest joy now is to teach apprentices, and Mindy is a genius apprentice that all teachers want to accept. This marks the end of part 25 of the story, Blade God of Blood. Thank you for listening. Please like the video and hit the subscribe button to listen more. Hit the bell icon to get notified of all the new content uploaded to the channel ASAP.